The sky so far, but I can't lose it.
Let's be innovative. Let's challenge a norm. Let's raise the bar. Let's be the elite.
A new beginning, another opportunity to make a statement. Lionheart celebrates its roots with the car that started it all. 18 races to determine who is the best in the most exciting form of auto racing on the planet. 200-mile-per-hour Indy cars inches from disaster or glory. There can only be one Lionheart Speedway Series champion whose name will be etched into the Lionheart history books. The Lionheart Speedway Series presented by Moser Racing starts now.
last time the Lionheart Racing Series and its Speedway Series drivers made their way to the Irish Hills of Michigan, fuel mileage became paramount. A fuel mileage race which seen many of its competitors try and sprint and save their gas all the way to the checkered flag before a photo finish victory for Robert Malechka III. This time out, a year later, new contenders have come to rise in the Speedway Series. Many different drivers have changed the script compared to 2021. But the main question on some drivers' minds is simple. Who will finish in HyperX victory lane? This is the Next Level Racing Michigan 200, live from iRacing's virtual Michigan International Speedway. Hello everyone and welcome to Race 8 of Season 2 for the Lionheart Speedway Series presented by Moser Racing, live on RaceSpot TV and ESTV. The Lionheart Racing Series is powered by HyperX, makers of premier gaming gear like the legendary ultra-comfortable Cloud line of gaming headsets. Whatever you play, however you play, HyperX knows for all gamers. For more information on HyperX products, visit hyperx.com. My name's Justin Prince. Alongside of the booth tonight is Andrew Kinsella, as well as Arjuna Kekapati in the producer's seat. You can follow along with live time and scoring thanks to our partners at 8TVO. Follow along with your favorite teams and drivers in the virtual world of motorsport. Let's dive straight into our graphics esports countdown to green as we count down the start of Race 8 of the season. It's been a wild season so far, Andrew, but the main trend continues to be the same heading into this one, entering Michigan. Lots of contenders, lots of winners, but still anybody's season without this schedule presented by Next Level Racing is gone.
Absolutely, Justin. This season is wide open for the taking for any of these drivers to put their signature on this, and it can really start here today on the high banks of Michigan. But you look at the next couple races, I think this is going to be the decisive part of this championship. You have the race here tonight in Michigan, but then Nashville, a really difficult 1.3 mile oval, and then the big one just 2 races from now, Indianapolis, the Indy 500, the second Triple Crown of the season. It's going to be double points there. That's where you really need to be sharp. So the momentum starts today for a lot of these drivers to try and carry that momentum into the Indy 500.
Especially with the prestige that comes from racing at Michigan over the years. But we mentioned the pressure starting to build up for the drivers. The driver standings presented by Graphics Esports help showcase that. Matt Wagner at the top of the standings has built a little bit of a buffer of about 37 points over Joe Branch. But Trevor Malone, Matt Taylor on top of each other nearly in the standings. Andrew Wood charging back hard after his points penalty early in the season from Texas. Things are fairly tight. You have, right now, 8 drivers within 100 points of each other.
Throw a blanket over this top 10. It is still anybody's race here. You look at even the likes of Mike Rigney, Sam Ryman. These are drivers who maybe they're not necessarily the drivers that are going to be winning a lot of races, but they're being so consistent that they're just hanging around this top 10, and it's just allowing them to go further and further into this season in with a shot at winning this. So if they can find a win or two over the course of these next few races, it's absolutely anybody on this list could still come away with the crown here.
Keep in mind, consistency also a big part of Wagner's points lead too. On top of things, Andrew, 6 top 5s entering tonight. Take a look at the team standings and some major shakeups entering tonight. Power Slide Motorsports in the points lead, presented by HyperX for the team standings. But Team Race for Sunset having some shuffling because Matt Taylor and Chris Fowler, along with Brian Beard, are now a part of Graphics LC MadWorks starting this week. That can have massive ramifications for these standings.
Yeah, absolutely. Your second place team has basically been gutted, and it is now down to Dark Horse Racing and Synergy Motorsports to really take that challenge to Power Slide Motorsports at the top of the standings here. So it's going to be very interesting to see how some of these teams respond to these new faces and the same faces in new places. So definitely looking to shake things up in these team standings that have been sort of static here for the last few weeks. It's going to change and change very quickly here.
Amongst those now scoring points for Team Race for Sunset, Shane Coogan in 13th position. Let's take a look at the rookie standings presented by Butt Kicker. We've talked about this a fair bit throughout the season. Andrew Wood Plenty of experience on the platform continues to lead those standings, but look who's within range. Samuel Ryman, still amongst the top 10 overall, second in the rookie standings. Shane Coogan, just mentioned him, has stayed close, and Gabriel Wood for JD Esports knocking on the doorstep of the top 3 in the rookie standings and the top 10 overall.
Some really strong drivers at the top of the standings, but there are also some drivers lower in those standings that are a bit of a surprise. You look at Jacob Oster and Gavin Sanders are two names that really jump out that just haven't been able to fire off this season yet, but they're still in with a shot at this rookie title. It's by no means a foregone conclusion that Andrew Wood wins this, particularly where we've seen the spin of the roulette table has landed on Oster and Sanders more often than not. It can just as easily land on Andrew Wood at any one of these races.
Keep in mind, some drivers doing double duty with various leagues tonight. Also, Dakota DeMade amongst those not in the starting lineup tonight. Let's take a look at your series details presented by GSI as we get ready to go racing for Season 2 competition here at Michigan. Custom fixed setups just approaching the start of the Triple Crown window, the second of the 3 in a couple weeks' time. But plenty of intensity for these RDW12s, you'd have to think, especially when it comes to Michigan. Lots to discuss when it comes to that custom fixed setup tonight, Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a little bit of an adventurous setup tonight, especially if you're in clean air. The car tends to get loose the longer the run goes on. It really burns off that right rear tire, and if you can keep that tire under you, you can really gain some time at the end of this run. But conversely, it's a risk versus reward, because if you burn off that right rear, it can very easily spin on you, and you can find yourself with a one-way ticket to that concrete wall. But it is going to be an interesting race. There's going to be a lot of, I think, coming and going. The cars don't necessarily follow as well as we saw last year, where it was a really packy race. This year it's going to be a little bit more spread out, more of that traditional early 90s feel to the racing here, where you can really get some runs going. And I think fuel saving is also going to be very important here today, as we have a 100-lap race distance. So a lot to talk about in terms of the race here today.
And you mentioned right there 100 laps the distance here tonight. The event details presented by Moser Racing, and a return home to the closest DW12 finish in Lionheart history. We mentioned the difference, about 3/100ths of a second between Malechka and his competitors coming to the stripe last year. And that was a fuel mileage race to the end, remember, because many of the drivers tried to stretch out and save their gas. The mileage today putting a very similar situation back into play. Estimates say drivers, if they were to go without draft, can make it to 7 to go. Pretty clear the fuel strategy could go towards the trends where, if it goes no cautions, we may see another fuel strat race.
Absolutely, Justin. But one thing I will say, that because it is a little bit more strung out than it was last year, that fuel saving number is just going to be that little bit harder to hit. So it's going to be even more important to commit to that strategy early. And then, of course, a yellow flag can just throw a wrench into the plans of the best of these drivers and strategists. And we've seen as few as 0 cautions, but we've also seen a number of cautions here as well. So you never know what you're going to get here at Michigan.
Roberts in the midst of wrapping up their final practice for tonight. Right now, more than 30-plus competitors making their way to the Irish Hills of Michigan. This facility, very historic when it comes to open wheel competition. Open since 1968. At one point was a part of the Triple Crown rotation and Real World IndyCar competition. Now, the drivers are all set to go for 5 minutes of solo qualifying. 2 laps up on the board. A massive field of competitors. The fastest time in practice, a tie. Shane Coogan and a newcomer for the series making his series debut tonight. Scott Rankin, a 32.158 in the draft.
Yeah, and that draft is going to see some very high speeds here today, but there's, of course, solo qualifying here. So it's so important that you nail these qualifying laps, especially, as I said, with that setup being a little bit more difficult to pass here. You're not going to be able to just slice and dice your way through the field like we saw last year with some of the drivers. So these qualifying runs, absolutely critical, Justin.
Here's a look at Matt Taylor to start things off for qualifying tonight. 36 entry-ins, few EOLs of note for tonight. Frank Forsyth allows Isaiah Dupree EOL penalties. You also have Hawkins having to serve an EOL penalty. Vern Hawkins III, who is third quickest in practice. Talk us through how to set this up as you see Taylor trying the high side for lap 1.
Yeah, so it's all about lap 2 for these drivers. What you're going to do is for lap 1, you're going to spend as much time as you possibly can and be as smooth as you possibly can on this high side and just get as much momentum, as much speed as you can off of turn 4 here. Then you're going to see Matt Taylor. He's going to basically aim nice and light for basically right there on that white line as he crosses. Now he's going to come back up the track just a little bit, arc it into this corner, and then get down as far as he can, basically hit that first seam there. The car hooks just a little bit on that seam, allow it to come back out without scrubbing any speed down this back straightaway, long back straightaway, and again, roll it into turn 3. You have to be very gentle with your inputs. You basically can't scrub any speed, and again, right on that first seam, and then straight down to this apron, and then there's a big bump just before that start-finish line. Cross the line, and then see how fast you go. Right now, Matt Taylor, P1 with a 32.456.
Question is, how long will that stick with Nick DeGroot up to second by 1/1000th of a second? What a run for the factory back machine as you see more drivers zip around the circuit. Amongst those looking towards the front straightaway, that is Tony Shalwin, crossed the stripe, 32.484. That is only good enough for 8th position in qualifying tonight. Lots of tightness once more when it comes to the top of the board, as we've seen in the past in Lionheart competition, as Gabe Wood puts up a 5.
Yeah, and I do want to mention, Justin, that Andrew Wood has had a connection issue in this qualifying session, so that is disastrous for your rookie points leader. But Matt Wagner, no better than 12th in that session you just saw there. So it's definitely not the session that he wants. Here's a guy that I'm looking at, though, Jacob Oster. He's a guy who really needs to have that good qualifying session. We've seen when he qualifies well, he's able to place well, but when he qualifies in the back, he normally gets swept up in something. So this is going to be a very important lap here for Jacob Oster.
And you mentioned the technical issues for Andrew Wood. He's the third different driver who's experienced similar issues, not in this race session per se, but you have Paul Jenkins, who is having issues traveling home through his flight schedule. He's not been able to make it for tonight. He had been spending time at O'Hare in Chicago for several hours today. Well, you also have Michael O'Brien, who had a power outage and an internet outage before tonight's race. Meanwhile, Oster looking to haul himself up the pylon, started off in the 34.4s. He is one of the few drivers set yet to make a second lap completion. There it is, a 32.5. 20th position, 21st in fact. Wolf.
Yeah, Jacob Oster, he'll be extremely disappointed with that qualifying effort. He just hasn't been able to put it together in the qualifying, and I really think that that's been the difference on his season compared to some of the other rookies, is he just keeps on getting swept up when he's in the back here, but there's still a few more drivers on track. Andrew Wood has been able to reconnect, but I don't think he's going to have enough time to actually set a lap here.
Drivers completing their qualifying session. Samuel Ryman, the last driver to set a time for tonight's section. 36 entrants ready to sit and fly around Michigan International Speedway here tonight. Just moments away from taking a look at your starting grid. Your thoughts after Q when it comes to tonight, Andrew?
It's going to be a really close race here today, Justin. I think that it's going to come down to a mixture of strategy and speed, and there are a number of drivers in that top 5 that are looking really strong, looking at the likes of Big Joe Hassard and, of course, Matt Taylor putting it on pole for the second week in a row, doing a really good job up there. He's looking very, very strong.
With that, drivers have completed their qualifying session. It's time to take a look at your starting lineup presented by Butt Kicker. On the pole tonight, it's Matt Taylor with a 32.456, 1/1000th of a second over Nick DeGroot. Joe's Hassard starts in third tonight with Mike Rigney in the 4th position. Rounding your top 6 in row 3 is Jim Herrick and Ron Hacker. 7th spot goes to Chris Fowler in the Graphics LC Madworks machine. Gavin Sanders, his former Team Race First teammate, in 8th. Tony Showen starts in 9th tonight alongside Brian Beard. Rounding out the top 12, Shane Coogan, and watch the points leader, Matt Wagner, starting from 12th, 3/100ths back. Joe Branch starts 13th with AJ Musselman in the 14th spot, with Jeff Sheehan and Michael Goodman, your top 16. Samuel Ryman starts in 17th amongst the 32.5s with Scott Rankin in 18th. 19th goes to Trevor Malone with Ryan King in 20th. Luis Gonzalez Nunez for Team Sim Race 24/7 starts alongside Jacob Oster, 8/10 back of the pole. 8/100 should say. Dean Mall and Gabe Wood round out the top 24. 25th goes to Gary Godso with James Watson in 26th. Andrew Wood and Craig Forsythe, the top 28. The rest of these drivers from 27th on back of note did not set times. Isaiah Dupree and Hugo Gallas also amongst that grouping. Gord Hawkins starts in 31st position tonight on your pylon. Then it's Will Gibson and Mike Gibson. Matthew Short, Creighton Carter, and Sam Crow also did not set times. Again, 3 EOLs tonight. Forsythe, Dupree, and Hawkins III to the rear. 36 entrants for the butt kicker starting grid. With that, the drivers making the way to the starting grid. Let's take a look at your featured onboard cameras for tonight. First, the Sim Race 24/7 onboard goes to Luis Gonzalez Nunez. Visit simrace247.com, where sim racing is for everyone. Tonight, with the butt kicker on board, will be your next starter on that pylon. The number 69 machine, that is Trevor Malone. We ride it with your butt kicker on board, as you see. Sim racing is better with butt kicker. Visit thebuttkicker.com. The 00 of Mike Rigney has the HyperX on board. Whatever you play, however you play, HyperX knows for all gamers, and HyperX is always ready to game. And the number 11, Moser Racing on board, Joseph Hasser. We're redefining sim racing. Go further, go faster with Moser Racing. Visit moserracing.com. Let's look at your featured onboard cameras. 36 starters ready to rip around Michigan. 100 laps, 200 miles your distance here tonight. In sim time, just approaching 1 p.m. Track temperature 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Air temp 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Partly cloudy skies on iRacing Day, May 15, 2022. Your keys to victory tonight, Andrew, as we get ready to go racing Michigan style.
Number one key is take care of your tires, particularly that right rear. It's going to be so important to keep it under you. Second is exercise some patience. There's going to be a lot of drafting, particularly early on in this race where the field is all bunched up. You need to be very patient. It's one of my keys almost every race with these oval drivers. You need to be patient, and no more so than here today at Michigan.
Of note, Hugo Gallas did not make it through the start procedure to the grid. He'll start on the pit lane for tonight's running of the Next Level Racing Michigan 200. With that, it's time to kick things forward. Competition, commitment, excitement. This is Lionheart, and this is the start of the Next Level Racing Michigan 200. We're underway from Michigan. New race leader after the end of the first lap. Nick DeGroot with the slingshot jumps ahead. Slingshot back for Matt Taylor as the fight is on for the race lead. But it's worth noting a slower start in the mid-pack, Andrew. A black flag for Isaiah Dupree at the back of the pack as a result of the start.
Yeah, there was a little bit of an issue there at the start of this race, and Isaiah Dupree was the unfortunate victim. But you can see the snake is already starting to form. This isn't the pack that we've seen last year. This is much more of a nose to tail snake situation here. It's going to be very interesting to see how these drivers adapt in the early going in this race, and what type of tactics they use to try and make up some positions here.
Dupree currently serving the black flag as the fight continues on at the head of the field. Nick DeGroot and Matt Taylor keeping that slingshot on forward. But keep in mind, Chris Fowler, we talked about this a little bit, coming into tonight known for being aggressive, already up 3 spots in the first 3 laps alone.
And
and a bit of smoke.
Yep, go ahead.
Was about to say, there's a lot of movers here in this part, too. Trevor Malone up 6 spots already in 3 laps coming to 4.
Yeah, and one of the things with a line of cars like it is right now is it's very tempting to try and use your momentum to make these moves. But one of the things that can happen is that if you go down there without any help in front of you, you can very much lose momentum. And I think that's what we're seeing with a couple of these drivers who are ducking out and then realizing that they just don't have the help down there to get them actually past the driver they're trying to pass. But as you said, Chris Fowler really starting to make moves here early. He's all the way up to 3rd and looking to the inside of Nick DeGroot here for 2nd place.
Still looking to try and make the peak, can't do it quite yet. And remember, this is the type of track where you'll see major runs from that mid-pack we've seen last year in particular. 1 or 2 drivers go 20 spots in 6 to 8 laps. As near contact in the heart of the pack, that's Brian Beard sliding up.
Yeah, Brian Beard very nearly contact there with Trevor Malone, and Tony Schown there on the inside is now taking advantage of it. Malone gets shuffled back. Jacob Oster also making some moves, and along with AJ Musselman, they're both up significant amounts of positions here in the early going. There's a lot of moving and shaking going in this mid-pack here, Justin.
Lots of drivers wanting to go to places. The question is, where will those places end up taking them? Here's a look at Luis Gonzalez-Nunez trying the high line, and that's an interesting mark too. A lot of drivers trying to find that clean air. Most of them have chosen the top line to do that.
And of course, when you choose the line that most of the other drivers take, you really can't find very much clean air. So it'll be interesting to see if any of these drivers start to really search either the extremely high line or the extremely low line. So we saw one car getting very, very high off the corner there. But I think the clean air, especially as this run goes on, is going to be very important. The setup and these cars here today, they don't have a lot of front-end grip on them. So it's going to be very important to just get that clean air to the nose and get that car turning well, especially early on in these corners.
Amongst those battling, keep in mind the battle for 24th. Yes, it's deep in the pack, yes, but the main thing is the swapping is not helping. In fact, they've nearly lost the lead draft already. Right now, Xi'an is nearly a second ahead of this.
Yeah, and that's one of the dangers of fighting this early on in the race is yes, you want to go forward, but at the same time, if you cost yourself the lead draft, then it's going to be very, very difficult in the long run, particularly in a race like this where I don't think that we're going to get a lot of cautions, judging how people are racing right now and judging by the amount of space there is between the cars. I think the cautions are going to be fewer and farther between, so you really can't afford to let yourself lose the draft this early on in the race.
You're seeing Andrew Wood as well just moments ago, and keep in mind, he's amongst those where if you're able to make passes at the right time early on, before things get busy like we just seen, you may be in a good spot by this point around the quarter way of the run, heading towards the head of the groups. Look who's amongst those moving ahead. Joe Branch is up 8 spots and hungry for more, trying to reel back in the 11. A bit of a sweet weeble wobble coming out for 2.
Of course, Joe Branch was really strong last time out at Gateway, but then got caught up in a couple of incidents there that really sort of ruined his day. But he's showing some real speed here early, but you have to be so careful with those runs, because the other thing about Michigan is, again, because you have so many different lines through the corner, you often find yourself coming into one line on that exit, and that's up near that wall there. So it's very, very easy for the driver on the inside to just sort of creep up and drift up into the driver on the outside. So that's something that I think that we're going to have to watch throughout the course of this race here.
Your attacker running the point in the O there was a perfect example of that, where the group nearly hit the wall on that exit. Fowler was able to get a little bit of space to avoid contact. They are still lined up 1, 2, 3 between Taylor DeGroot and Fowler now. Still trying that top line parade, heading towards the midway point of the estimated fuel run. The estimates tonight, 31 laps around the top point of the marks. As here's a look from the mid-pack, Shane Coogan.
And Coogan is another one of those very impressive rookies that has just been quietly putting together a nice solid season, but he's one of the drivers that I think can really take a next step here very, very soon. He's shown some speed in a number of races, been fighting for the win in a couple, but I think that it's very close to him to be able to start fighting more and more for these wins.
The drivers still trying to fan themselves out. Still, Chris Fowler has showcased that he's wanting to go a bit, just nowhere for the run to be taken. Taking advantage of the checkup, Joe Branch. That's just behind and in front. Now here's a look just behind Chris Fowler as Branch doesn't have any drafting help.
And that's Big Joe Hassert to the outside of Joe Branch there. Though, of course, those two drivers have been combatants in battles for years upon years here in the Lionheart Series, dating all the way back to when the IndyCar Series ran this DW12. So they're very familiar with each other, but yeah, you can definitely see just how powerful that draft is down this back straightaway. None of these drivers in this top 10 really want to get out of the draft, but then it all fans out in the corners again, and they're just searching for that clean air. But Matt Taylor getting very, very high coming off of the turn there.
Taylor starting to feed some draft to Fowler's teammate. Will this help out? You see in the heart of the pack, a slow car. That is Andrew Wood, who's amongst the biggest movers. The battle is still on for second, but Wood is very squirrely all of a sudden in the 64. Something has happened to Wood as they fight up front.
And I'm wondering if Wood just got a little bit too greedy coming off of turn 4 there. I think he might have just pushed up. That's Matt Wagner to his outside, and they're in a 3-wide position, and then Wagner just,
trouble
nice
front
save
straightaway.
from Wood.
You see it on the replay, but trouble the front straightaway. AJ Musselman is up in the wall, the 54. Another car in Kevin Sanders has spun into the pit lane. We stay green.
We're green for now. Of course, Musselman is going to have to try to find a way to limp that car almost a full way around if we're going to stay in the green flag, or at least find a safe place to pull off on the inside that doesn't trigger the caution. But it's almost the exact same thing that happened, or that I was saying. Musselman just gets a little bit too high, and then Gavin Sanders nowhere to go. He spins down on the pit lane, and just really unfortunate for Sanders, but Musselman, yeah, he just gets a little bit too much of the aero push and straight into the wall. Sanders, again, nowhere to go, and look at this evasive action from Matt Wagner.
Musselman still is trying to get his car back to the pit lane. The tough thing is, if Musselman cannot get back there, this is one of the tracks where if you park on, say, the back straightaway apron, it does trigger a caution. There is Musselman right there trying to wheel it back to the pit lane as they battle it still for second. Fowler still can't get the run around the group. They are gaining, though, on Joe Branch and Joe Hassert.
Yeah, they are in this leading pack here. Basically, the pack is splintered where Musselman was before, so the likes of Goodman and Malone and Oster really need to be able to get back and reel in that leading pack again. And they are starting to do that now, but you can see just how much that incident there did splinter
for the lead.
Back half. But we have a pass for the lead, Chris Fowler.
Chris Fowler slingshots around Taylor, his teammate, to take the race lead for the first time. Taylor had led 12 of the first 18. Now it's 1-2 for a brand new team grouping in this series.
And that might be a little bit of strategy there from Fowler and Taylor, because I did mention that one of the things that you have to watch out for is that right rear starting to go away. And one of the things that can make that right rear go away is running in clean air, because you get so much downforce on the front. It doesn't heat up the fronts as much as the rears, and you start to get loose. So maybe Taylor's starting to feel the car starting to go away from him. They don't have the weight jacker or the ARBs to play with here. So I think it might just be that Fowler needs the lead and Taylor needs to follow for just a little while here.
See the battle for ninth heating up. In fact, now for Tony Shalwin and Shane Coogan. They've gone side by side a couple of times, just a couple rows behind them as well. The side by side with Trevor Malone. Some of the wiggles you were talking about, Andrew, are starting to come in. Corner exit in particular, that looseness popping up.
Yeah, and this is just a thing that you have to be able to drive through. You have to be able to have the car tight at the beginning of the run, but as I said, it's going to loosen up, and you have to be comfortable. managing the throttle, because it will be very throttle dependent, particularly on that exit of turn 2 there. That's where the car or the track really sort of falls away, and you're really leaning on that right rear. So yeah, you just, this is, as much as oval racing, you can think that it's just foot to the floor. Not in this case for these drivers. They're really going to have to drive these cars, particularly in this last 10 or so laps of the stint.
Within that estimated 10 laps or so in this stint. Big Joe Hassard amongst those who has had some bobbles, the 11, for example, in the top 5. Just the chess match starting to break in. 17 cars are in the lead pack for reference, separated by 3 seconds at the moment. The next car back is Scott Rankin, who's already 1.3 back to the track. As you see, that 2x2 really fanning on in and coming into play. Oh, and
we have a couple of pit stops actually here, Justin.
That is Creighton Carter and Ryan King electing to come in, this time by 21 laps into the run, in fact.
Yeah, so that's some interesting strategy going on there from these drivers. I think Creighton got in there very hot, didn't he there, Justin?
No speeding penalty, shockingly enough, for Creighton Carter. He did go out side by side with King, though, just a second ago. Now that's an intriguing layer of the strategy. Were we expecting that, possibly?
So I think what they're doing is they're just basically trying to avoid the loose cars. You see Joe Hassert nearly losing the car off a 2 there. So they feel the car's starting to go away from them now, so they figure they'll just come in a little bit early, try to use the fresh tires. But of course, what they're also doing is they're just basically precluding themselves from being able to make it on just the 2 stops that we talked about the possibility of there being. So it's one of those situations where if you're just not comfortable, sometimes the discretion is a better part of valor, and you just need to listen to what the car is saying. And if you don't think you can control the car and keep the car under you, you're better off coming into pit lane and living to fight another day.
Still dropping back throughout this run massively now is Hassard. Hassard has already been shuffled to 11th. He started the past few moments inside the top 5. This is partly why you see him bobble all the way to the bottom. He'd been running that low line below the first seam for much of this run.
Yeah, and you can see, I think it was that seam that you mentioned that really tripped him up. He sort of started to come across that seam, and it basically just was that extra little bit that threw the car sideways. These cars are on a knife edge right now in terms of rear grip, so it's very much important that you're managing those tires, and when you run that low, it can really work that right rear tire, especially on corner exit. And I think it just caught out Joe Hassert there.
Meanwhile, a wrestling match is broken out for 4th. It's Ron Hacker trying to pull away from the battle. Joe Branch and Mike Rigney trying to say otherwise, with Jim Herrick trying to charge back ahead. 4 cars covered under a blanket as the leaders have broken the draft from this.
And this is some really racy stuff from Jim Herrick here. Really impressed with him so far in this race. He, of course, has had some success in the Retro Series, but I think this is the most competitive that I've seen him here in this Speedway Series, especially this early on in the race.
Yeah, this has been a very intriguing run, to say the least, for many. Big wiggle for Taylor in the race lead battle as they go 2 and 3 wide to the heart of the pack. Last time by, Gary Gonzo went into the pit lane. Will anyone join him with this pack starting to get very racy? No peeling on down for the top grouping, but look who's amongst it. Remember the EOL for Craig Forsyth? He's coming to try and make it 3 wide with Coogan and Malone at the flag stand.
And Malone nearly lost it coming out of 4 there. He had a big checkup, so some of these drivers, they've used up that right rear tire, but they're still going 3 wide off of 2. That's probably not a good recipe for success there, as Craig Forsyth also gets loose on that inside. I think particularly the inside off of 2 and outside off of 4, that seems to be where the cars are the edgiest right now, Justin.
Forsyth, another edgy bobble, is out to 12th again, though. What a charge ahead, quietly, too, for the 72. Most of these spots for Forsyth have been picked up in the past 10 laps or so, with the tire fall off really kicking in. He's been rotating the corners quicker than some.
Yeah, he's been walking that very fine line of control and out of control, and sometimes you put a toe over it, but so far he's been able to keep it going. But this is the nervous time for all of these drivers. They're going to have to find a way to survive 3 more laps, and if they can do that, they've made it towards that first pit window that really allows them to do that 2-stop strategy we've been talking about.
Samuel Ryman won't reach that strategy. He's ducked in this time by in the 59 machine, so the window open for him. Matt Taylor indicating over the radio just now he is pitting on lap 31 coming to 32. This is a little tight for that strategy for the driver with the Hero logos as he nearly spins it on the seam up through 4.
Yeah, this is probably, I'd say, at least 1, if not 2 laps too early for Matt Taylor, but that's what can happen when you're leading the race. There's very little opportunity to fuel save if you're in the front of this field, so it only really will get more difficult from here for Matt Taylor. Oh, we got some trouble here.
The 93, James Watson, has spun it on his pit entry at the back of the pack. We stay green after his trip to the infield. More pit stops coming up. This time, Gonzalez Nunez, Hawkins, as was the race leader Chris Fowler, all coming in. Pit party time has broken out at Michigan as Fowler amongst the first to hit the cones this time around.
Whoa, that is a driver going in there really hot.
That's Hawkins the third, and no speeding still for anybody, it appears so far. Keep in mind, it's 55 miles per hour the speed limit, one of the quicker speed limits on the series schedule this season. As here's a look at Watson's situation.
Yeah, I can't believe that he was able to get that onto pit lane and around that cone, but now we are in the meat of this pit stop cycle here as we saw a little bit of an incident. I think that's Goodman.
It is Goodman as he nearly comes up into more cars. Goodman has smashed his right front wing after slamming into the back end of Ron Hacker's car. One other car was in the wall in that sequence. It is stopping on the track, and Gary got so we stay green as the pit windows open. Here's a look at the 99.
It was a late call here from Goodman, and he was just never going to be able to stop there and just plows into the back of Ron Hacker. And then here we have Gary Godso. He, again, I think made a small mistake through that turn 4 area, and that is a destroyed front wing and right side pod of that car, and he is, I believe, stopped now and will not bring out the caution.
Just got it towed in time, was still trying to slow it down when the tow came in. Everybody's come into pit now except for one. The 5 of Brian Beard has stretched it further than anybody else in the pack. This is lap 35 coming to 36 for Beard. Beard coming in to close the window. We'll see where he cycles, but the race leader after all the others projected to be Chris Fowler by more than a second. Taylor and DeGroot are already 2 seconds back of the 20.
Yeah, Fowler has just gone off into the distance here, but that's going to be a double-edged sword for Chris Fowler because it also means that he'll have no one to fuel save with, so he's got to find a way to already, his window was pretty thin for this next time. He would have had to gone into lap 34 or 35 of the stint. Now that's going to be next to impossible with no drafting help.
And the undercut, very powerful for track position at least, Andrew. See this battle you're watching now? Some of the drivers in it went in 10 laps ago. Carter, Gibson, King are all in this main grouping of cars on screen.
Yeah, and that just goes to show just how much the drivers were having to pedal the car in those last 5 or 7 laps of the stint, keep the car underneath themselves coming out of these corners. But these drivers here, they're going to have to pay the piper eventually, and they're also going to have to add another stop compared to most of the drivers here. I think that the drivers that are really on the same strategy as those drivers that came down much earlier, Chris Fowler, I just don't know if he's going to be able to go. Same with Matt Taylor. They're going to have to find a way to fuel save in order to make this happen for both of the MadWorks cars.
Keep in mind with all this, Coogan is leading that pack 5th on backcourt lead, nearly 6 seconds behind the leader. Rigney has broken away from these drivers, but the difference between his times in this pack, 0.4 of a second quicker. The 29 all the way to the 19. That's 5th to 24th. all within 1 second of one another. Several wing changes took place during that previous sequence of pit stops. Keep in mind, Wood, 23 seconds. Ron Hacker, 50 seconds in the pit lane. Also making the wing change, Michael Goodman, who's in 27th. Meanwhile, the shuffling is on and a little bit of close calls. Gonzalez Nunez nearly saws the front wing off of Coogan's car.
And this is what these drivers are going to have to start to do to try and close back up to the likes of Rigney, DeGroot, and Taylor. They're going to have to try to work together and find a way to maximize their speed and pull this group back up towards the top four. But I really want to say that Mike Rigney's doing a great job in that 4th place, but we've got a nice battle going on between Taylor and DeGroot. What's surprising for me, though, is that Taylor seems to be the one who wants to lead between Taylor and DeGroot. If I were Taylor, I'd be trying to find a way to force DeGroot to pull me around and maybe, just maybe, make my fuel number for a 34 or 35 lap stint. But short of that, I don't know that Matt Taylor is going to be able to make it on just one more stop.
Yeah, that would be a massive question mark here. 1/10 last time by. Ron Hacker out of the race. Had struggles coming off his pit exit and was running as low as 135 miles an hour on the apron for coasting it to the pit lane. He's done for the night. 3 wide with some of the drivers on old tires meanwhile. This is a battle amongst the top 10. Jim Herrick middle. Hold on to it for the time being.
And of course, Hacker was the driver who was the victim of Michael Goodman on that pit entry, so I suspect that there was just probably some residual suspension damage, because that wasn't just a minor hit from Goodman. That was a very major rear ending that Ron Hacker withstood there. So unfortunate day done for Ron Hacker.
Not a surprise, as we talked about earlier, to see that, because even when we seen the replay earlier and noticed the rear end with the hit. Meanwhile, frustrations building in this fight. Jim Herrick trying to make a swap for 10th. And things are getting intriguing here as they're losing ground to Trevor Malone. Herrick nearly to the wall.
It's one of those things where you need to cooperate with each other in a race like this, particularly when you find yourself losing time lap over lap, as Hassert and Herrick are doing right now. You need to just sort yourself out and fall in line here, and they just don't seem to want to do that. Both of them want to lead, neither of them want to follow, and that doesn't surprise me knowing Big Joe's personality. He is definitely one of the drivers who never wants to be the one in the second position. So yeah, it's just one of those things where you need to find that balance between your competitive spirit and your desire to further yourself in the race, and hopefully these drivers can sort of settle themselves down and pull themselves back towards this top 10 battle here that's developing in front of them.
Swapping is still on amongst these two. Malone and Will Gibson also getting into a swapping battle for reference here. Already quickly approaching halfway in this race. Amongst those two of the biggest movers, Craig Forsyth, who's just behind Nunez, who is still trying to swap around with Coogan. They've reeled in Mike Rigney, however. So now this 3-car breakaway is about to turn into a 4-car one, as long as they keep it clean.
Yeah, and again, Rigney has just been very, very impressive here today, but he's not the only one. Shane Coogan, Luis Gonzalez Nunez, all doing a really, really good job inside this sort of top 6, top 7 battle. Forsyth, I think your biggest mover of the race right now, up 21 positions. Also, Gibson in 11th place, the 05 machine, up 20 positions. He's just in a battle right now with Matt Wagner and Jacob Oster. He was in a battle. He's actually on pit lane now, Justin.
Just called in this time by Will Gibson to the pit lane for his second stop of the race. This might be a call in the vein we've seen before of Creighton Carter, who is in 16th currently.
Yeah, and I think that it's just another of the cases where you're just sort of listening to what your tires are telling you, and sometimes those tires tell you need to pit a little bit earlier than you were expecting to. And it's just better to take that pit and maybe have an extra pit stop in this race than actually potentially losing the car, basically.
Absolutely. The main thing, too, with all this squabbling, though, is, especially if you're the case of those trying to save the gas, trouble! Middle of the back straightaway. Caution out. And in the middle of the track is King. Under yellow at Michigan.
Well, we made it nearly halfway through this race, lap 48 before our first caution, but it was definitely a massive impact there for King. He just loses the car coming off of turn 2. He's on the very, very high side. He'd been running that line, just brushes that outside wall, nearly gets into Tony Schowen on that inside, and then spears right back head on into the back straightaway wall there.
So there goes the pit strategy we're just starting to discuss. But you see right there, very high up in the marbles, but the corner exit just hits the safer barrier.
Yeah, he was just a little bit too high, and there is a lot of grip up on that high side, but at the same time, you have basically no margin for error, and I think he was just flirting with disaster one too many times there, got high, brushed the wall, and then from there on, you're just basically a passenger trying to avoid your fellow competitors, and he did avoid Tony Schowen there, and speaking of avoiding action, nice job from Sam Ryman to avoid the spinning car right in front of him.
With that, the first caution of the race, just about everybody in the pack is coming into pit as to be expected just prior to the halfway point here in this one. Now it's going to be intriguing how the rest of the strategy plays out. The race off the lane sees Chris Fowler months the first off. He nearly spins the tire, still exits the cone first. Nick DeGroot, Matt Taylor, Shane Coogan, Luis Gonzalez-Nunez, top 5 off the lane.
And the duo from MadWorks of Matt Taylor and Chris Fowler, they are breathing a sigh of relief here, Justin, because they probably weren't going to make it on the other strategy to extend it out and only have one more stop. This now changes everything for everyone. It puts them all on the same strategy. You're looking basically at 2 25-lap stints. You won't have to deal with the cars getting quite as loose as before, and you also basically assure that everyone is going to be the same on fuel no matter what. So very good break for the MadWorks duo.
Worth noting, reason for the last spot for Matt Taylor, there was a slide in the box for the 8 machine who locked up both the front tires and crossed the edge of his pit lane front part of the box for his service. Only the one spot lost, but as we've seen, the battle for the lead can be also critical. Also, wave around for Will Gibson, who pit a couple laps ago. Everybody else who is still running on the lead lap. 30 cars in that regard coming up.
Yeah, and we have had some attrition. Obviously, we started with the 37 drivers, but first caution of the day, Justin, I think it's been a really good run so far, don't you think?
It's been a really great race so far with some of the battles, but really intriguing some of the strategy in turn. Chris Fowler has taken command of this race, and we were talking a bit before tonight about some of the attrition when it comes to Fowler this season, where he's showed good speed, but it's just been about getting the job done, keeping it clean. Up at the front almost every race, no top 10s to show for it. Now, coming towards halfway for the green flag, he leads the race with the most laps led in this event so far.
Yeah, but I think this will be a really key test for Chris Fowler. Is one of the things we've noticed with him is he tends to put his car in maybe a little bit too much jeopardy and makes decisions that basically don't allow him to get through the race. Even if the incidents themselves aren't his fault, he puts his car in that danger zone. So I think what we're looking for here from Chris Fowler is maybe a little bit of a safer approach on this restart, where he's defensive but not overly defensive. But it's going to be, I think, a stern test for him right now.
Especially since, for him, he drives with the cursed labels on this car now. It's been a battle with those logos on the side of his car in other portions of Lionheart competition this season. Halfway through this one, green flag waits up at the stand for the next level racing Michigan 200. 100 miles to go for Michigan. A clean start for Chris Fowler, already up by 5 car lengths. But how long will that lead last with the swap around so critical early on in the runs at the start of this race. DeGroot trying to reel him in.
And look at that snake coming off of turn 2 there, Justin. One of the things about the restarts here is that they are single file in the IndyCar series and the Speedway series, so it does allow for a little bit more spacing than we saw on that initial race start. But Nick DeGroot, with authority, takes that lead, but Chris Fowler taking it right back down this front straightaway.
That time by, Fowler got the lead lap. Matt Taylor, worth noting, is electing to go for the saving strategy, lifted, heading down the front straightaway to prevent 3 wide. You expect some give and take here for a few of the drivers in the popcorn seats. Others, not just for the race lead with a swap into 3 again, but others like Gonzalez Nunez making it clear they want to go, as well as Forsyth, who wants the top 5 as Nick DeGroot leads them to the flag stand once again with the side-by-side of the stripe. Near contact in the battle for the second pack that's already formed. Matt Wagner to 8th.
Yeah, Matt Wagner and Trevor Malone, they're having a bit of a ding-dong battle here for that 8th and 9th position, and it's allowing Joe Hassert and the rest of the top 7 to really start to gap this battle here and actually break the draft here very, very soon. So the question will be whether Joe Hassert still has enough of the draft, which I think he does, and that's going to allow basically a top 7 breakaway. And even within that top 7, it's the top 3 that's really putting their authority on the front of this field. The remaining 4 are sort of scrapping them amongst themselves, so we might have several different packs going on here very soon after this restart.
What a fight, to say the very least, up at the front, because Nick DeGroot wants to be the Pied Piper. DeGroot, led last time by, leads them into 3. The look from Taylor, and we mentioned this, keeping patient is the hero. Says hero inside the car for reference. Matt Taylor continues to wait to see what happens here rather than force the issue.
Yeah, and I like the strategy from Taylor. Just let Nick DeGroot and Chris Fowler, 2 very aggressive drivers, sort of have at it at the front here. But one thing he's got to keep in mind is that he's got another aggressive driver right behind him in Shane Coogan. Coogan's been showing some really good speed throughout the course of this race. He's been able to make some moves, and he is really starting to separate himself, I think, from this pack as well, in terms of just his ability to read the draft and to read the situation and to make the move when it's necessary. So it's a very important skill that you have to have in a race like this, is not just the ability to make the move, but the wisdom to know when to make it.
Here's a look on board the SimRace247.com on board. Luis Gonzalez Nunez has been shuffled back to 7th in this train with the pass from Big Joe Hassert. And what a charge ahead for Nunez. Qualifies, but a struggle a bit this season for the 14, but top 7 around this point of the race. Huge for that green, white, blue, and red machine.
Yeah, but back at the front, it is still Chris Fowler and Nick DeGroot and Matt Taylor just steadfastly refusing to enter into that fight just yet. And I really do think that Matt Taylor's just sort of saving his stuff, saving his energy for what will be the final dash to the finish after this next round of pit stops, which despite us only pitting less than 7 laps ago, I would expect probably around lap 75, somewhere between 70 and 75 is when most of these drivers will come down pit road.
Trouble is, if you're in the battle for 8th right now, even with the swap draft, 0.3 of a second loss last time by. The average laps, past few laps, in fact, is starting to fall back in the direction of the top 7 being quicker, and then you have this. 3 wide, Herrig in the middle, Oster on the top, Hawkins the third, now on the bottom of Oster. That's not going to help close the gap up.
No, it is most certainly not. That was a very aggressive move there from Vern Hawkins and Jacob Oster. He's been riding that outside line, and I'd really like to see him maybe move down off that outside line and try to make a few more moves happen. He's worked his way slowly up towards the outside of that top 10, but he seems to have stalled his progress. He hasn't really been able to make that breakthrough that we were kind of expecting him to make at some point. But meanwhile, the battle up in the top 7 is really heating up. Joe Hassert, Craig Forsyth, and Shane Coogan are really going at each other. And of course, the leading trio are still doing the same sort of fashion that we've seen them for the last 10 or so laps.
fastest laps for reference in this race in the 32.5s tonight. Right now, the pace in the 33 flats for a majority of this pack. 40 laps to go. Look at Shane Coogan, full throttle into the bottom, looking for fourth in front of Forsyth and gets it.
Yeah, that was a really brave move there from Shane Coogan. And you can tell that some of these guys are realizing that the tires are starting to go away from them, so they're getting a little bit desperate to make some moves. Another thing to note, Justin, is that the track temperature all the way up to 52 degrees Celsius, 126 Fahrenheit. So the tire troubles that we saw on that first run, they're going to come back here very quickly for some of these drivers on this second run, because very, very hot track there.
Amongst the drivers trying to make a comeback after troubles earlier, Michael Goodman, your Moser Racing driver profile tonight. And what a start of the year has it been for the 99. 4 top 10s, 1 top 5 was amongst the top scores and the points in the early going. 4 poles for the driver who made his first start at Motegi last season.
And of course, Michael Goodman is no stranger to the Lionheart series. He raced in the IndyCar series for many, many years, took a few years off, and has come back with a vengeance, shown so much speed in qualifying. He just hasn't been able to quite put together the race results yet, but it's just, he's another one of those drivers that I just really think is waiting to break out here.
The battle for the lead is on between two teammates, Matt Taylor, Chris Fowler. But as we roar forward towards the final pit stop window, we'll take a quick step aside. You're watching the Next Level Racing Michigan 200 on RaceSpot TV and ESTV from Michigan.
With the Butt Kicker Gamer 2, what you see and what you hear is what you feel. Butt Kicker. The future is feeling.
Welcome back to the Irish Hills of Michigan for tonight's coverage of the Lionheart Speedway Series presented by Moser Racing and the Next Level Racing Michigan 200. You on RaceSpot TV and ESTV. Justin Brent's Andrew Kinsella with you with our producer, Arjuna Kankipati, as we make our way forward to the start of the final pit window. 32 laps to go. The green light coming on for many drivers in the next few moments to make it to the end on gas. 7 drivers have waltzed away from the rest of the pack. Matt Taylor, Chris Fowler, Nick DeGroot, Craig Forsyth, Shane Coogan, Luis Gonzalez-Nunez, and Joe Hassard all in the conversation for the race lead, separated by 1.7 seconds, but 31 to go this time.
And this is where the strategy really starts to get intriguing, Justin, because, as you say, the pit window is open, but is it open all the way? We've seen already today just how powerful that undercut can be, but at the same time, if you try the undercut, it does expose you to that danger zone of another caution coming out. So, oh no, we've got a spin here. Nick DeGroot, Chris Fowler.
The race leaders rack up at the front under caution. The battle for second has exploded, with two of the most dominant drivers of the race collecting each other off of turn 2.
Oh my word, and it just looked like one of those cases where I think DeGroot slid up right in front, and then Fowler, he tried to lift off, but he just had nowhere to go, unfortunately, and it was just another day, another night of bad luck for Chris Fowler. And obviously there was no ill intent there from Nick DeGroot, but there was also just nothing that Chris Fowler could do to avoid that either.
And talk about a race changer. Those two drivers had been outright dominant before that incident. Fowler, 33 of 70 laps led, Nick DeGroot, 13. Now under caution coming up to pit stops with us, just inside the fuel window to make it to the end. What a way for this battle for the race win to change.
And through that, look who it is in first place right now, Justin. Your pole setter, Matt Taylor, cycled back to the front. Will he be able to keep it through this pit cycle? He did make a mistake last time down pit road, but also in your top 5 right now, Forsyth, Coogan, Nunez, and Hassard, all really fast cars here today. This is by no means over here.
Huge opportunities for some now to be right there to battle for the race lead. Lost to execute for the pit stops. That's inside, 30 laps to go. Oh boy, is the major question mark, because now at this point, drivers have to know they can push forward. Taylor locks up the tires, but still goes up on the checks this time again.
The question is who makes it off pit road first. Shane Coogan with a really nice stop. I think he might have just picked Matt Taylor for the lead of this race here.
Yes, indeed, he got it. Taylor couldn't get rolling. Another mistake on pit exit and pit entry in particular, Andrew, for Matt Taylor.
And it's been the story of Matt Taylor's races. He just hasn't been able to negotiate pit road successfully time after time. So the fortunate thing for Taylor is he only did lose just one position, even though Craig Forsyth and Luis Gonzalez-Nunez were coming quickly. That's just one position down, so that means that Taylor is still very much in this fight, but it definitely is just one of those unforced errors that as a driver it just sort of eats away at you and eats away at your confidence on pit road.
What a change of projections for many drivers. Chris Fowler, significant damage has required repairs. Wing change for Nick DeGroot in 22nd. One driver will take the wave. Coming up to the 1 to go signal this time. Mike Goodman this time opened up the pit window. Will take the wave. At least once these caution flags tonight, A. Gibson has gone in a wave around.
Yep, it's been, I think, the story that you really don't want to be on the short side of these pit cycles, because we've always seen, especially as the race goes on, people get a little bit more desperate, that a caution flag can always come out and change things up, and that's certainly what's happened here, but it's going to be very intriguing here as the lights go out on your pace car, exactly what's going to happen here, because you got some really, really fast drivers. One driver I want to highlight for you right now, Justin, Jacob Oster has moved his way all the way up to 6th position, and he and Matt Wagner will both now be right back within that lead draft.
Very huge for a few of the drivers, absolutely here. But to reset your top 10, Coogan, Taylor, Forsyth, Nunez, Wagner, Oster, as you mentioned, with Malone, Hassard, Hawkins the third, Branch. And you know the crazy thing? Two of the drivers just mentioned there had EOLs tonight. It started at the tail, They're right in the conversation, 3rd and 9th respectively amongst that list.
Just goes to show you how perseverance, consistent running, keeping your nose clean, and then finally a little bit of luck can really change your fortunes in a race.
27 laps to go for the Next Level Racing Michigan 200. Shane Coogan leading the first laps of his night in the 29 machine. See how things fare out after a team shake-up. His fellow teammates at Team Race First. Off and away goes the Team Race First Sunset machine. Down to 27 laps to go for Michigan. The battle already on for second. Taylor trying to fight off Forsyth. Forsyth up top, can't make it work.
Yeah, that was a little bit of an adventure start. There was a little bit of a checkup right in front of the field, and it's caused a little bit of an accordion effect that's allowed this three-car breakaway, and Forsyth was really on that restart there, and he looks really racy around the outside of Matt Taylor here. And he looks like Shane Coogan is going to give the draft to Craig Forsyth. That's going to allow him to slot right in front of Matt Taylor here.
Check up this time, no send for the 72. Wait and try and settle things out. Luis Gonzalez Nunez and Matt Wagner also within this main grouping. Jacob Oster has nearly lost the draft of this top 5. 3 wide for the lead. 3 wide into 3. Taylor trying to make the move as Forsyth trying to make the move. Forsyth makes the move work on both of them.
Yeah, but Forsyth lost some momentum there coming off the corner, and it's allowed Matt Taylor right up under his wing. Meanwhile, Coogan sticking to that outside lane, and it is worth mentioning that right at Jim Herrick and Joe Branch, that's where the breakaway has happened for now at least. It does look like they still might just have a sniff of that draft, but they're going to have to work together. Similarly, Vern Hawkins and Joe Hassert need to work together, but it's the top 7 again that's sort of broken away here.
Absolutely has been the type of night for some to go and squabble. Taylor nearly hitting the wall in the squabbling. Drops back to 4th. Nunez up to a race-high 3rd. Trying to go to the run of the high side. Now, Forsyth going for the slider off into 1 and 2. Coogan trying to use the banking as a ramp. Trying to dime in the corner, makes it work for the run.
At 24 laps to go, and these drivers know it, then they're racing like it. They know that it's all coming down to this, that they need to start positioning themselves strategically here, and they can't afford to let their tires go off and be too far back in the draft. They really need to be up near the front of this lead draft, and they're certainly racing like it right now, Justin.
2 by 2, in fact, you've seen with Matt Wagner. Still side by side for the race lead. The pass wasn't completed this time around through 1 and 2. Taylor with no checkups yet. Coogan does get in line, but Nunez wants to lick the stamp. 3 wide for 2nd. Nunez jumps up to a race high 2nd in the 14.
Oh, that was a bold move there from Luis Gonzalez Nunez, but he is not satisfied with just the 2nd place. He's looking for 1st here, and Coogan is trying to put it 3 wide as well here. So these drivers really want to lead this race. They do not want to be in 3rd or 4th place here.
Huge run for Nunez, though. Outside for the race lead. Nunez to the point for the first time tonight. Forsyth shuffle to 2nd. Here comes Oster along with Wagner on the bottom and top respectively as the snake is on.
And they're 3 wide in the back of that field. Trevor Malone, where did he come from? This has been just an up and down day for Malone. We've seen him with some troubles early. He had some adventures, but now he's right back up in this leading pack, and Jacob Oster just quietly sitting towards the back of this pack right now. I think it's very interesting to watch here, Justin, the differences between some of these drivers being very, very aggressive and some of them just trying to save their stuff for this final run to the end, and it'll be interesting to see which one turns out to be the correct strategy.
That'll be huge to see how this plays out. Very critical. Make sure the chess pieces work out right. Still, Coogan holds on to 2nd.
Malone and Wagner!
Caution flag is out after the bobbling contact. Malone is on the apron. 3rd yellow of the night with under 20 to go this time.
And somehow Malone saved that.
Wow. And Malone gets to keep majority of the spots there. What happened? Because I think he just did a 360 down the backstretch.
360 no scope from Trevor Malone. Basically, Wagner comes down. He was getting pinched off by Oster at the stop, or on the top line. Reacts just a little bit too hard. Comes down on Trevor Malone. Malone spins down onto the apron. Then watch this 360, and then just hits the gas, pointed in the right direction, and that's all there is to it.
What a maneuver from Malone, though, to make sure no contact to the inside with that one. Under caution, as a result, Malone dropping to 14th. But just like that, this just got even more interesting. As we mentioned, drivers expect to make it to the end on gas, especially now. What do you do is the huge question.
Yeah, I think there's some real opportunities here. If I'm in that sort of 15th to 25th position, I'm coming down and taking tires. But some of these drivers, it looks like maybe Craig Forsyth or Matt Wagner are thinking about it, and Joe Hassard is the first driver to actually go down. Tony Schowen coming down pit lane as well. But it's going to be interesting here because we've seen that the tires really do fall off. But at the same time, this caution does give these drivers an opportunity to cool these tires down. I just think that there is going to be a significant advantage to having fresh tires here. But at the same time, we've seen every single restart, there's been a separation, a gap. And I don't know that the fresh tires will be enough to overcome any gaps that happen for some of these drivers who are coming down in maybe 13th or 14th position, which is where Hassard and Schowen will probably end up here.
That'll be something to keep an eye on here, and keep in mind, with many of the drivers up front, a chance for a few of them for the first career victories in series history for them, because Wojcicki III leads the all-time wins chart with 7. Amongst those in the conversation, Matt Taylor, who has a chance to tie Alexis Newsom for second all-time in the early going into series history. Craig Forsyth tied for 4th, but Dean Mall with 2. But you also have Coogan, Nunez, Jacob Oster, amongst those looking for career win number 1 here in the midst of all this.
Yeah, absolutely. And none more so, I think, will be as hungry as the driver in first place, Luis Gonzalez Nunez. We've seen him so fast on so many occasions here, Justin, but he just hasn't been able to put it together at the end of this race. This is hands down his best opportunity to finally take home a win here in this Speedway Series.
Coming up to the 1 to go signal this time around on the Speedway. 29 drivers still running here at Michigan, 16 to go. Expected when the green flag waves. There they go to start lap 84 with the lights out. Nunez, Coogan, Taylor the top 3. Forsyth, Oster, Wagner, Hawkins the 3rd, Herrick, Branch, Andrew Wood the top 10. Here's the crazy thing with Wood. Remember how we talked about earlier with Wood's troubles that he was struggling to had a lengthy 50-second pit stop at one point. He's back in the hunt after his major weeble wobbles earlier.
Yeah, and it just goes to show you just how much it pays to have that perseverance and to, even when you make a mistake, never give up and never say die, and none more so than Andrew Wood. And this is one of the reasons why he's doing so well in the rookie standings right now, leading that battle, is he's just been able to stay around where some of his other competitors just haven't been able to do so. So really strong run there from Andrew Wood, but I think we've got, 16 to go when we come back to green here. This is going to be a wild final 16 laps here, Justin.
Especially with 13th on back, Andrew, on fresh Firestones.
Yeah, absolutely. Those people on those fresh tires, they're going to be coming, and the only question is, will they be coming quick enough to make it all the way back up to Luis Gonzalez Nunez in first?
Coming up to the restart, Nunez in control of the pack, his first laps since Pocono. And remember, that was a fireworks show of a stint in the race lead that night. 13th was where he finished. Green flag is out, back off and away. 16 to go from Michigan. Nunez with a good hop, but the battles are on in the heart of the top 10. Herrick amongst those the first side-by-side. The drivers on 4 fresh tires, staying single file for the most part outside of
Yeah, and the first cars really going side by side were Branch and Jim Herrick, who had been having that ding-dong battle between them before, but it looks like Hassert and Wood have gotten around Branch. So Hassert, that first driver on those fresh tires, he's all the way up into 8th position already, so that's really strong stuff. But they're going 3 wide here into turn 1 for that 8th position.
3 wide amongst those drivers, up towards the front. The battle is on between Nunez and Coogan. Coogan not as close this time. Back and forth is Nunez. Coming up to 14 to go. Taylor chooses the top as well as Coogan. Forsythe does the same. Here's a look from the 40 Sim Racing Machine of Forsythe.
And here is the question is, when do you go? If you're Forsythe, if you're Hawkins, you need to keep in that draft. You're about 1 second back, but like if you're Taylor or Forsythe at the back of the leading pack right now, you need to be able to time this run very, very carefully in order to maximize this. But you have to be so cognizant of those drivers on fresh tires and where they are. Oh, we got trouble on the backstretch.
It's Gabe Wood. Gabe Wood slides through the grass. No caution yet. We stay green for now.
And that was some great car control from Gabe Wood so far to keep us under green, but he had a massive impact on the inside wall in the backstretch. It looked like he got together with another car, and it just midway down the backstretch just flung him straight into that inside wall.
Here's a look at the quick replay. You see the snake in the lower third. Meanwhile, center screen replay. This is what happened with Wood.
And I'm not sure who that car was, the red car right behind him. It looked like that there was just a small check up there, and just a chain reaction caused Wood to basically lose the back end of the car. And as soon as he did, he came across in front of another car and then straight into that inside wall.
2x2 for the race lead still. Matt Taylor wants his spot back. Can't get it to work on Coogan this time. Big check for Nunez. Top 4 single file into the corner, but keep in mind, the driver who's now in the midst of the swapping for 5th, Joe Hassert on fresh tires.
Yeah, and so far he's the only driver on those fresh tires that has really made them work. They're just fighting too hard, tooth and nail, back in that pack. He's fighting with Matt Wagner, he's fighting with Vern Hawkins, and they're not cooperating, and they're just letting that lead group get farther and farther away from them. They need to sort themselves out and find a way to get the gap down instead of it's going up lap after lap to the leading 4.
Meanwhile, side by side still for the point. 10 laps to go, 20 miles to go. 2x2 in the second pack, 1.8 seconds back of the leader. Coogan and Taylor, along with Nunez and Forsythe, as it's 4 wide in pack 2, oh boy.
That was really close there. Jacob Oster and Joe Branch nearly got their wires crossed, and they both, I think, realized just in time what was about to happen.
Oh, near contact!
Oh my goodness, these drivers are all over each other here, Justin.
That was Matt Wagner getting the back end nearly of Oster. Showman hits Wood. Wagner with contact. Part of the pack as the caution is out. Onto the wall goes Showman. Several others go down the track. A huge shunt with the contact for Michael Goodman.
Oh my, we saw that coming from a mile away, didn't we, Justin? They looked like they were going to wreck each other down the back straightaway several times, and then they finally did it through turn 3, and a number of drivers at the back of that pack just getting caught up through no fault of their own there, unfortunately. Looked like James Watson was also involved, but ultimately it was these two right here. Tony Showen, he just drifts up just a little bit, gets into the back of Andrew Wood, and then nowhere to go for Michael Goodman, nowhere to go for Hugo Gallas, and then James Watson gets speared there by Michael Goodman just off to the left of your screen there.
Take a look at this once more. And then you have James Watson. Welcome to the incident.
And just one of those things where what goes up must come down, and unfortunately for Watson, it came down right in front of him and nowhere for him to go. But that incident all started just because they just didn't leave quite enough space. I think Wood probably could have left Schoen maybe another half a lane, because it was just getting to that point in the run, especially if you were one of the drivers who didn't take the tires necessarily, that the aero wash was going to be in full effect there. It would be very, very difficult to hold your car down on that very inside lane. So it's just one of those incidents that just happens in this type of racing at Michigan, and especially when people are so desperate as they are with just 9 laps to go and now 8 to go for your leaders.
And keep in mind, the point of no return here tonight, about 3 laps to go for MIS. And I don't think we're done yet with the shuffling. Taylor got the scoring loop. Nunez, who has led 9 laps in all of this, has been shuffled back to 4th for this restart. But the huge, huge part of this, Big Joe, he's 5th. And now, no driver side-by-side with him for the start of the second pack.
Absolutely. No one wanted to see that caution more than Big Joe Hassert. He needed that caution because the fighting that they were doing in that second pack was just preventing him from taking advantage of those fresh tires. Now he is right on the back of those leading 4, and he, I think, is definitely one of the strongest positioned here to potentially disrupt things at the front of this field. But never count out Matt Taylor. We've shown time and time again that he's able to just get that little bit extra on these ovals, especially when he's in the lead of this race. And I think that he is going to be definitely very difficult to pass here in these last few laps. And then, of course, we can't forget that at any point in time, a caution could potentially end this race.
Absolutely. Also in the midst of all things, it's worth noting that on top of Big Joe Hassert in the top 5, big opportunities for a few others up towards the point. Joe Branch is about to have a lot of defending, possibly, with Trevor Malone, Tony Schoen, Nick DeGroot, Dean Mull, as well as Scott Rankin, Matthew Short, Jeff Young, Carter, Crow. Oh, and don't forget Ryman Wagner and Gallus, who are amongst those getting more tires and repairs done, who are all on fresher rubber than the driver who's in 9th in Branch.
I got a question for you, though, Justin. If you're Jacob Oster in 7th place, do you ride here and take a nice top 5, or do you go for the win?
What do you think he's going to do? I think we both know the answer.
Oh, I think we do here, Justin.
Coming up to 6 to go, many drivers with a chance for career win number 1 amongst them. Coogan, Nunez, Hawkins the third, Oster. Others looking to try and move up in the all-time wins list. Taylor with the chance to tie for 2nd all-time. Forsyth with a chance to try and pick up what would be his 3rd victory. And tie Matt Wagner for 3rd all-time. Lots of chances for history. 6 to go for Michigan. Tire spin for Coogan.
And that has checked up the field, and I think that Joe Hassert might have just jumped that start with Luis Gonzalez-Nunez, so that has thrown his into chaos because he's going to get a black flag here.
He hit the back end of Nunez, in fact. Black flag for the 11 of Big Joe Hassert. So take Hassert out of the equation. Bonji's over the radio as Nunez gets the spot as they try and battle 2 by 2 behind him.
But all this jockeying with Joe Hassert and Luis Gonzalez-Nunez, it's allowed the leading trio to really separate themselves. So it's now a battle between Coogan, Forsyth, and their leader right now, Matt Taylor. But Coogan wants that outside lane, and he wants to go to the front here.
A major wobble to the wheel for Coogan. Coogan makes it stick. Taylor keeps it on the bottom. Forsyth comes up with the draft. Top 3 separated out by about 1/10 into 3. Hassert has not served the penalty yet. Here's a look at the reason.
Yeah.
Clear cut A, clear cut B there.
Yeah, I think Hassert was... Oh.
What are they doing now as there's a massive checkup? Nunez nearly hitting Hassert again.
Yeah, I think Hassert just needs to serve this penalty here. He needs to get out of the way and let these drivers race for the win. I know that it sucks that he's racing with the guy who gave him the black flag, but at the same time, I think Hassert was just trying to anticipate just a little bit too hard and just came in a little too hot on that restart, hit the gas too early, and it was some netcode contact that got Luis Gonzalez-Nunez loose. So Unfortunately, it's just one of those things that can happen, but we're past the point of no return, Justin, and now Jacob Oster finds himself 5th position. Luis Gonzalez-Nunez, now that Joe Hassard is gone, he is fully in this battle, but Vern Hawkins III just got into
Trouble!
Caution!
Caution is out of the middle of the straightaway. Who's got the scoring loop after a spin for Coogan? Might have it. Gallas was the one spun around to the back.
And I think that Shane Coogan has just won this race here. He was ahead when the caution flew. If my timing scoring is correct, he was just in front of Craig Forsyth there.
First of all, reason for the caution, you see the damage for the 84. Gallas adds a bit of help. A lot of help.
He had a lot of help there, unfortunately. I think that might have been one of the Gibsons there that gave him that help, and nothing that Hugo Gallas could do there, unfortunately, but it's an unfortunate way for this race to end because we were setting up for quite the grandstand finish, but I'm really thrilled for Shane Coogan here. He definitely deserved a win in this series. He'd been showing a lot of pace, a lot of potential, and it's finally come all together for this 29 car.
Huge day for the 29 machine coming up to the white flag this time around for Shane Coogan. The chance, honest, there's no trouble to join a wins list that has 11 names on it. Now about to be 12. White flag waving up at the stand from Barney. And Coogan started off rough this season, but has really come on strong the past few weeks coming into tonight to get himself inside the top 13 in points. 1 top 5, 2 top 10s before tonight. The best finish of his season had been at Pocono, remember. He was also in the conversation at Gateway, and now the track record of improvement after one rough race ends in a W.
Yeah, when you come into a series as talented and as deep as the Lionheart Speedway series, there are 2 options. You either sink or you swim, and the thing about Coogan and that improvement that you mentioned is he's really proven that he is a swimmer and he's a fighter, and he has found a way to elevate his game since coming into the Speedway series. Cleaned up his driving, made it much faster over the course of these last few races, as you mentioned. So yeah, definitely very deserving winner here tonight.
Huge night indeed for Shane Coogan. Before tonight, keep in mind, just the 58 lead laps. Leave about now a 6th of that number coming into tonight, this evening, 12 in this direction. But now, Shane Coogan, it's the chance to celebrate with Forsyth, Taylor, Nunez, and Oster right behind him. For the first time in his career in the Lionheart Speedway Series presented by Moser Racing, Shane Coogan is a winner. He wins the Next Level Racing Michigan 200. Coogan gets the job done at Michigan in just his 8th start in this series this season. What a drive and what a fight in the closing stages at Michigan.
Of course, we would be remiss about not talking about some of the other drivers in this top 5 as well. Justin, Luis Gonzalez-Nunez, a nice solid P4. And then Jacob Oster, this must be a welcome relief after all of the trials and tribulations, coming away with a top 5 here today. And then, but we also had some championship implications here. Matt Wagner down in 15th position. Joe Branch up in 8th position. That's going to eat into the championship lead of Matt Wagner here.
Coogan getting the chance to celebrate Lionheart Speedway Series competition for career win number 1. What a night. The race first Sunset competitor. And all this coming, mind you, with the shuffling of the teams entering this evening. What a way to try and bounce back for points for Sunset. With that, let's take a look at the unofficial race results brought to you by SimRace 24/7, with Shane Coogan taking the victory under caution for Craig Forsyth. Matt Taylor finishes in 3rd, with Luis Gonzalez Nunez and Jacob Oster rounding out the top 5. Mike Rigney quietly finished in 6th, Kurt Hawkins the 3rd and 7th. Joe Branch, Trevor Malone, Dean Mull, your top 10. In the 11th spot tonight, Scott Rankin and his series debut picks up a top 15 to begin his career in Lionheart, with Tony Schowen, Nick DeGroot, Brian Beard, and Matt Wagner the top 15. Matthew Short finished in 16th with Creighton Carter, Jeff Gunn and Samuel Ryman, along with Will Gibson, your top 20. 21st spot goes to Sam Crow in the 70. Hugo Gallas after his contact 22nd. Joe Hassert, while serving the penalty, drops to 23rd, rounding out the lead lap drivers and finishers. The DNFs include James Watson, Michael Goodman, Jim Herrick, Andrew Wood, and Mike Gibson, all from the same incident. Gabe Wood was involved in a crash prior to that caution, while Chris Fowler had one of the biggest crashes of the day in terms of implications, a fight for second. 31st went to Ryan King, which started the cautions building up in the second half of the event with its first yellow. The RDNFs, contact and pit entry for Ron Hacker, Gary Gonzo, contact as well we've seen earlier, as well as Gavin Sanders making contact with AJ Musselman. Isaiah Dupree, 1 lap finished before parking it. This one. That's a look top to bottom at your race results, as that brings us into tonight's post-race coverage, presented by HyperX. HyperX Post-Race Show. Lionheart Racing Series competition is powered by HyperX, makers of premier gaming gear like the luxury ultra-comfortable Cloud line of gaming headsets. Whatever you play, however you play, HyperX knows we're all gamers. For more information on HyperX products, visit hyperx.com. Let's dive straight into HyperX coverage here tonight. First, to Victory Lane, where it's Shane Coogan celebrating career win number 1. Shane, you've done it. How does it feel to be a Lionheart Speedway Series winner?
Woo! Yeah, thanks, Justin. Yeah, it feels great, man. It feels amazing. It feels great to finally pull one of these off. It's such a competitive league and so many great drivers out there, so it feels really good.
And it took a lot of work to get up there in the first place. Talk about your progression to the pack, from the mid-pack to the conversation point for the race lead, to make history tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. I just I wanted to pace myself and let the race, come to me in the early stages, get a feel for what the car was going to do. It had some interesting handling, throughout the run as the temperatures went up, and as you were deep in the pack, you definitely had to be patient. Wait for others to make mistakes, look for opportunities, but just kind of tried to save some fuel in the first stint, see how the race played out. We had some cautions, work in our favor and helped us get to the front. But I just want to thank my team. Team Race First is awesome. Sunset Arctic Graphics, Dakota paints some really cool cars, so go check him out. His new blade, or his new game, Echo Blade, is on Steam. Go check it out. And 4D Racewear as well. Those guys are awesome. The Monday Night Fixed broadcasts, Race First does a great job. So quick shout out to those guys. But wouldn't be able to be here without Race First. And just was on the radio with my team, and we were just looking out for each other, trying to get to the end of the race.
And you mentioned the team. Have to ask us a little bit. Of course, there was some shuffling with your respective team and the Sunset side of the banner. Of course, you respond with the W. What was that like entering tonight?
Yeah, I think it's, at the end of the day, it's we're all here to have a good time, to have fun, but I'm also here to win, and I think at the end of the day we can all be competitors and respect each other out on track, and that's what it's all about. So really happy to bring a W for Team Race First, and to show we're here to win, and we're going to keep fighting at the front.
Congratulations on the victory, Shane.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the broadcast, guys. Take care.
That's Shane Coogan. First career victory tonight. Second spot goes to Craig Forsyth. And Craig, from EOL to second, what was that like, going from the back to the front?
Holy cow, was that a race? That I did not expect to be. I love Michigan. It's a track I enjoy doing, but I didn't think I was going to get up that high. I'm definitely happy with that tonight. That's for sure.
And it was intriguing to see how things were faring out for you. What was that like, trying to sort out the right strategy, but also trying to pick the right battles, because that was a critical part of some of the pack breakup tonight?
Well, that first stint, I knew. I mean, I had to push. I was terrified of losing the draft starting from that far back, because if you got 0.7, 0.8 seconds behind a car, that was it. You weren't catching up to the person in front of you anymore. So I was carving as hard as I could through the pack, and luckily everyone stayed nice and close enough that I was able to keep moving up. And I think it was, but I knew that the sacrifice of that was the last 10 laps were going to be an absolute nightmare on the tires. And sure enough, they were. I had to dial it right back, and I think I lost 3 or 4 spots in the last 10 laps, just trying to keep the tires alive and get to lap 34 so that I knew I could 2-stop no problem.
And of course, coming up towards the halfway point of the season, the championship becoming more in clearer picture. Many drivers in the conversation. With you tonight, being able to keep it clean, you'll enter that conversation in an even closer mark, potentially. Your opinions on the championship fight heading into Nashville?
Oh, it's going to be close. I've actually got to admit I'm having knee surgery in the weekend just before the Nashville race, so it's going to be questionable as to whether I'm going to be Robert Whitkinsing it or still too injured to race at that point. So I'm taking it race by race for this season. I think it's good to be competing, but I've got to be realistic with how my summer's going to be here. But it's good for the 40 racewear guys, and I mean everyone was good. Having Shane over at race first win, it was a good night for us, especially coming from the back.
Congratulations on the podium.
Thank you, man.
That's Craig Forsyth in second. Third spot went to the pole sitter, Matt Taylor. Matt, you're amongst those fighting early for the race lead, and then the strategies changed quickly past halfway with the cautions. What was that like from your perspective up towards the front all race?
That was badly needed because we were not going to make that on fuel. I was easily several laps short, so we got that caution, and I kind of figured we would. In fact, I was surprised we made it one green flag stint, just for as loose as it was really hard to drive the end of the stint. And that caution really helped set things and was able to get reestablished.
And of course, a very busy battle for the race win tonight. What was that fighting like? Because 7 drivers for several different runs coming up to that checker flag under caution had been in the mix to win this race, including yourself.
Yeah, it was just it was a little bit like Atlanta, where that caution. I caught the caution right there, and then just catch it tonight. And almost the same exact strategy. I knew the bottom was really good for those first couple laps, and was allowing me to kind of hang on to the position. But a couple laps in, those tires get warm. You can't really hold the bottom like you need to carry the speed. And Shane and Craig were just in position to snag those with the caution.
Indeed, and an interesting night in turn for a new team label, Graphics LC Madworks. Talk about that with that switch, because you and Fowler, after the switch, led a fairly decent amount of this race.
Yeah, we've been good all season, and that whole thing is just really unfortunate. Chris was removed from the team due to a small incident in the IndyCar series, one that didn't even bring about a penalty, and it just seems it's just silly. It's kind of funny, I guess, but we brought on Brian Beard, and we're also partnering with Synergy, so we're going to hang out with those guys, and we'll bring our strengths to that team, I think, and see if we can still make a charge of this.
Thank you very much, Matt.
Thank you.
That's Matt Taylor rounding up the top 3. I'd like to thank him, Craig Forsyth, Shane Coogan for taking the time to speak with us during post-race coverage tonight. And Andrew, what a show, what a fight. How about 3 wide at some points for the race lead? It's Coogan picking up career win number 1, though.
Yeah, it was an absolutely incredible race, Justin. The only thing that was missing was a green flag finish, but you can't always have everything that you want. But definitely one Speedway Series race for the ages. But just looking forward, we now have just one more race before the Indy 500, and that, of course, is in a few weeks' time at Nashville Super Speedway. And this is going to be another very interesting track for these cars, and It's going to be very interesting to see what happens at this concrete 1 1/3 mile oval. I keep on wanting to say 1.5 mile, but it's not. It's actually just that slightly little bit smaller than your normal 1.5 mile oval. So it's going to be very interesting to see what it's like here for the very first time in the Speedway Series.
In the Graphics Esports Nashville 175 presented by Butt Kicker, taking place June the 27th, starts approximately 10:05 p.m. Eastern Time. But with that, we'd like to thank you for tuning in for tonight's coverage as well as tonight's presenting sponsors, Lionheart Speedway Series. Moser Racing is revolutionizing sim racing with the development of industry-leading hardware and software products like their R9 direct drive wheelbase, GS steering wheel. Featuring zero-delay wireless technology and made from high-end materials, Moser Racing delivers the precision you need to reach victory lane. The Lionheart Racing Series is powered by HyperX, makers of premier gaming gear like the legendary ultra-comfortable Cloud line of gaming headsets. Whatever you play, however you play, HyperX knows we're all gamers. For more information on HyperX products, visit hyperx.com. You're passionate about sim racing, but it always feels a little flat compared to the feeling of driving a real car. Now you can actually feel what it's like to drive a race car. Butt Kicker haptic hardware and software are easy to install and let you feel every bump in the track, slip of your tire, and engine red line. The tactile feedback is so accurate and realistic, you'll be driving faster and having more fun than ever before. Next Level Racing is an industry-leading cockpit and motion simulator manufacturer devoted to creating the most immersive experience possible. Global sim racing community. Take your racing to the next level and visit nextlevelracing.com. Gomez Sim Industries are makers of high-end esports equipment and controls, precision-built using nothing but the best materials available today. Passion in handmade craftsmanship drive each made-to-order build, creating a driving experience like no other. Visit GomezSimIndustries.com. And it's not just those 5 names, but so many more, as well as all the partners you see here who help make the Lionheart Racing Series tick. To learn more about them, go to LionheartRacingSeries.com. You can find out more information about those 3 series. Lionheart also runs by going there to see how things have been going on those sides of the cards. But with that, we'd like to thank you for tuning in to tonight's coverage from iRacing's virtual Michigan International Speedway. Congratulations to Shane Coogan, a first-time winner tonight. We'd also like to thank you for tuning in once more, as well as my co-announcer Andrew Kinsella and Arjuna Kankipani for the work put in tonight. But with that, it's time to say goodbye. Enjoy the rest of your evening. You've been watching Lionheart Speedway Series presented by Moser Racing Competition from Michigan.